Has the Mueller report taken President Trump off the hook? Why were the charges against actor Jussie Smollett dropped? And does the Green New Deal have any kind of a future? And find out what the media missed in our most underreported stories of the week. I'm Adam Byrne, and this is The Square Circle. Hello and welcome to The Square Circle. I'm your host, Adam Byrne. Joining us today are Stephanie Foster of Smash Strategies, Conservative commentator Mimi Spute, and Rachel Tripp of Young Voices. Welcome, everyone.
Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Special counsel Robert Mueller wrapped up his investigation into Russian collusion with the Trump campaign without any new indictments, but some are hesitating to fully exonerate the president. Here's the story from Voice of America.
The results of the Mueller report now known, but so far only in summary. Attorney General Barr has to act with caution before releasing it in full, but without the full report, Democrats said it is impossible to make an informed decision.
I don't need Attorney General Barr's interpretation of the report. I am for the report, and our main thrust on this issue is simply transparency. Release the report, then come to conclusions.
So, President Trump claiming total exoneration. Is he right, Stephanie Foster?
Well, I don't think we know. What we do know is that there were a number of indictments during the probe, about 24 of them, and we know who some of the people are by name, Paul Manafort, et cetera. So, I mean, obviously there were people indicted. The question is the president off the hook, as you asked? And I think we really don't know. We know there's a 4-page summary of the Mueller report produced by the Attorney General, who appointed by the president clearly. And I think what really the American public deserves to know, to the extent there's not classified information in the report, is to have access to it. We do have a unanimous 422 to nothing vote by the House of Representatives saying that there should be, the Mueller report should be made public. And also, if the president is exonerated, I actually think it's in his best interest that the report be released, again, without any kind of classified information that could be harmful to our national security. So I think the jury's still out, as we say, actually a metaphor for this case. And there are juries still working on the grand jury, et cetera, and other court cases still going on that come out of the Mueller probe. So I don't think this is the end of the story. There's certainly going to be action on Capitol Hill. How much action, we don't know. The report is supposed to be transmitted to Capitol Hill by April 2nd. Doesn't look like that's going to happen. So this story continues. I think we don't know everything, and we need to hold our judgment until we get more information.
Yes, and Mimi, isn't the point here from Stephanie that we haven't even seen the Mueller report here? We've seen a report of the report.
Well, I think that's fair to say, but it has been 2 years of a really intense investigation. We have an over 300-page report that's coming out. We're going to see more of it as it comes to Capitol Hill. But it's been 2 years of Mr. Mueller's investigation, and I think it's time for the country to move forward and time to let President Trump do his thing and just to move past this. I think that's for the best interest of the country.
So do you think the report should be released then?
I think parts that are appropriate, sure. But until then, I just think let's just move forward. I think it's where we're at now is, we've done this investigation, there's been indictments, and we haven't found any collusions for President Trump. So I think it's more appropriate just to continue on.
Yeah, so there were 2 quotes, direct quotes that Attorney General Bill Barr put in his summary. One which quite clearly said that the special counsel didn't find collusion, as it's been come to be known. Mm-hmm. But the other one said that that he could not exonerate the president when it came to obstruction of justice. So why is the president claiming total exoneration?
Well, I guess that remains to be seen when we see, the parts that are appropriate to release, but there hasn't been any cause to, put that on the president yet. So, we'll know more as we move forward, but I believe, President Trump, this is just a lot of party politics have gone into play with this. And so I'm looking forward for this to just get out of the news cycle, because there hasn't been any substantive things put forward from the president yet.
Okay, and Rachel Tripp, Mimi pointed out that this report is reportedly over 300 pages long. So how could Attorney General Bill Barr give us a 4-page summary?
You know, I think that there are probably a lot of people with legal practice history that can take quite a long document and make it very digestible. That being said, I do think that we should move forward, but the best way to do that is by giving the public access to this report so that we can see what is in it once and for all. I think the only way that we're going to shut down this rumor mill or certain sides that are convinced that there is evidence of collusion or there's not evidence of collusion is to give the American people access. I think that something that you haven't seen is inherently more compelling than something that you have, and our ability to sort of get rid of that classified information, take the necessary time to do that, because not doing so would also hinder the investigations that are still ongoing and put our country at risk, is the best way to move on from this.
Okay, and this is being described as perhaps the best week the president has had in office. Does anyone find that strange when we're talking about an investigation that's led to the indictments of his former campaign manager, his former national security advisor, and many others?
Well, I would say, look, there's so much going on in the world. I think the best week for a president is really a tough thing, especially we have, incredible crises around the world. In Yemen, we're involved in trying to figure out what to do about Afghanistan. We had 2 planes, crash, not in the United States, but obviously there's implications around the oversight of the Federal Aviation Administration, an American company. So it might have been the best week he's had, but there's really a lot going on that's critically important for the president to address. So I think, obviously, that is what all presidents have to do all the time, and he's not the first president who's had to do his job while there have been investigations ongoing. Certainly, other presidents have had that happen, President Nixon, President Clinton. So being able to do 2 things, which is have an investigation ongoing, not distracting you from your job and doing your job, I think is inherently what we ask of the president.
Okay, thank you all very much. But right now, I'd like to remind our viewers that you can submit your questions to our guests through our website, publicsquare.net, or via Facebook or Twitter, and we'll answer as many as we can live on air towards the end of the show. Also this week, the Chicago State's Attorney's Office announced that it has dropped all charges against actor Jussie Smollett for allegedly hoaxing a hate crime. Here's the prosecutor's explanation.
So you believe he's guilty?
Yes.
So why drop the charges?
Our priority is violent crimes and the drivers of violence. Jussie Smollett is neither one of those.
And is community service and $10,000 enough to wipe this clean?
I feel that it.
So has justice been served, or is this a whitewash, as Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel called it? Rachel Tripp.
So I think that this is an absolutely despicable decision to acquit him of these charges. I think that it sends a message that fear-mongering and public deceit are things that are acceptable modes of behavior in the society, which I strongly disagree with. And I also believe that it sets the standard that we get to cherry pick and choose which of our perpetrators or of our lawbreakers we will prosecute or not, whether it's a crime large or small. If it is something that, again, even this prosecutor has said there's very strong evidence of, it deserves to be prosecuted or at least investigated in a much more thorough manner.
So, of course, the prosecutor and the state are saying that, this is a minor felony and they have much more important things to focus on. So you don't have any sympathy with that argument?
I agree that there are certainly always going to be larger issues going on in the world. Stephanie just pointed out a lot of them. But if you are someone who has taken an oath to uphold the law and to prosecute the law, then you need to take crimes equally seriously. We can't just decide one day we're going to prosecute someone for a hate crime, one day we're not. One day we're going to go after a burglar, one day we're not. Doing so would just be making a mockery of our legal system.
Okay. Stephanie?
Well, I mean, I'm a lawyer in practice law, and I will say one thing is prosecutors have a tremendous amount of discretion, and that is built into our system. I don't agree necessarily with this decision. I don't know enough about it in some ways. I have to admit I had never heard of this guy because I didn't watch Empire until this whole thing started. So I feel like I'm catching up a little bit. And so, it may be that we all think he should be prosecuted, but their prosecutorial discretion is something that's very embedded in our system. I'd also say, just maybe this goes to my own sense of it, but this story has been a huge story for a long time, really taking a lot of space away from, again, critical issues that people really, I think, are probably more interested in their daily lives.
Sure, but isn't it still a big story, because we're talking about what appeared to be, at the face of it, a racist and homophobic hate crime, which have been on the rise in the last few years in this country. So isn't it important that we saw the truth in this case? We saw it come to trial. We saw the evidence. Now a judge has sealed this case, so we'll never really find out what happens.
Well, I think you are right. I mean, there is a rise, certainly in hate crimes. There was just a conviction yesterday, or a sentencing around the Charlottesville murder of a young woman by James Fields. So yes, I mean, you're right. These are big issues that we need to all be paying attention to. On the other hand, I feel like it's also a case that because of who this guy is, and he's well known in the entertainment world, maybe it's a little more of a focus than it might be if it was someone else.
Okay, and Mimi, where do you come down on this?
So I think what needs to be mentioned is that he blamed these horrible, actions on Trump supporters. And, I just think that he was trying to self-promote and also pinning a group, a political group on this action. And I just think that is really, really sinister, and it's very problematic. And I think I would have loved to have seen, more repercussions for Mr. Smollett, because, what he did really it's just so atrocious, because if somebody does have a hate crime, now they have to fear, like, will I be believed? Because now there's this track record of a celebrity, lying about things like this. And especially making that political spin in already a divisive climate, I think is really reprehensible. And I wish that there was more repercussions for Mr. Smollett on that.
So do you think that's why the president is talking about the Justice Department looking into this case?
I think that's fair to think that way. I think, ultimately hate crimes is a huge thing, and then he directly pinned this on Trump supporters. I could see how he could make that judgment.
Okay, Rachel, anything else?
I do think that there's some validity to that angle. I would be very interested to know the political leanings of these prosecutors. I think that this is an example of a system that has granted someone a considerable amount of privilege that I do not think would have been granted had the crime been against a different administration or in an equivocal setting in earlier years when maybe President Obama was in office.
Okay. Stephanie, you think he's getting off lightly here because of the political conditions in Chicago?
Well, I mean, obviously the mayor and the police department have said this is, an abominable result. And I don't disagree at one level, but I do think it is inherent in our system that prosecutors get to make these kind of determinations. There are some we agree with and some we don't agree with. I think it's healthy that we are talking about it, though, because it may actually be that this was from the wrong decision, but prosecutors do have that ability in our system. And so I think we just need to be mindful of that, and also be talking about the fact that our criminal justice system is not always equally fair.
Okay, but given the seriousness of this case, he's apparently done 2 days of community service and forfeited a $10,000 bond, when the police department have spent over $100,000 investigating the case. So does the punishment fit the crime here?
Well, it doesn't seem to on its face. But again, I'm not the prosecutor making that decision. And so I'm not trying to not answer the question, but I think it is inherent in our system that prosecutors do get to make those kind of decisions all the time. They make them every day.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And finally tonight, the Green New Deal went down in defeat in the US Senate this week. All Republicans and 3 Democrats voted against it, while 42 Democrats voted present. So, Mimi Spute, where do you think this leaves the Green New Deal?
I think that's just about it. It failed. There are a lot of particularly conservative members of Congress that are coming up with their own new, legislative packages that are honestly more substantive. The Green New Deal was a resolution, so it was supposed to just set an overall tone. But the tone that was set was way too broad and way too squishy. So I think, movement on climate change is kind of heating up, and I think that's good. I think both sides of the aisle have made some good steps towards coming up with a good resolution for this.
What steps are Republicans taking to solve climate change?
Right, yeah. So Lamar Alexander, Senator Romney, and also Senator Graham have been coming up with ideas. Senator Gates, I haven't read it yet, but he's starting to talk about his response to the Green New Deal. It's the Green Real Deal. So it's kind of the conservative things. They've been talking about investing more in research and in developing innovations to kind of stimulate kind of more incentives to make practices more green. So more substantive changes rather than saying, no more airplanes, things like that. So
I think a lot of those senators, though, have questioned whether climate change is man-made and whether it is the threat that most scientists say it is. Do you agree with that?
Not for the ones I'm specifically speaking of. So Graham and Romney have been pretty upfront about this. They've been kind of leaders there. I can't, the House is a big place, so I can't speak to every single Republican. I think something great about our system is that both parties are pretty diverse in spectrum, and they don't all think the same thing on one issue. But, and I think that's wonderful. But, we'll see. There are some folks that, do have a little more rigid views of climate change. So we'll see how they shake out on these new proposed things and how they formulate as they move forward in our process.
Okay, and Rachel, where do you think this leaves the Green New Deal? I mean, where do you stand on it, first of all?
Sure, so 2 questions to 1. So first of all, I think that the Green New Deal was never written in a way that meant for it to be effective. I don't think that it had the necessary measurements for interacting with the actual system that we have in place in a way that would make genuine change. I think that if we want to have the resources to deal with climate change and take care of our climate, which I do think is an important issue, we need to first make sure that we're doing so in a way that is not going to cripple our workers, flatten our economy, take away resources that many have come to depend on and are really not positioned to give up. And so if we start thinking in things in terms of growing the economy while managing this issue, that is a way for us all to move forward in a much more productive manner.
Okay, Stephanie, do you agree with that? Or do you think the Green New Deal is the solution to climate change?
Well, I mean, I think that we all would agree that we need bold action on climate. Really reorganizing and rethinking about how we get our energy, how we use our energy, what kind of research we need on clean energy sources, what kind of incentives, whether it's a carbon tax or another incentive, tax incentive to use certain kinds of clean energy or not, or to say you're going to be taxed if you use gasoline or carbon. So I think those are all things that we need to have a really robust debate about and situate this in the world that climate is a big issue and temperatures are rising. We need to really address that. So I think the Green New Deal is something that is one vision, and there are many visions. And I think being able to take it as a way to really jumpstart the conversation, to continue the conversation about the need for a really rethinking of this whole energy issue is really important.
Okay, and of the Senate vote this week that we're focusing on, of the Democratic candidates for 2020 who are in the Senate, none of them voted for this, but it seems to be becoming kind of almost a litmus test for your candidacy in the Democratic field. Why do you think that they didn't just come out and support it? People like Senator Booker and Klobuchar and others.
I don't know. I mean, they certainly have to make their own calculation about whether or not that's something they support, or they decide that they really want to just vote present because, as I understand the argument, it was that the vote was going to be somewhat of sort of a political showcase and not wanting to participate in that. Senators have that, can make that decision. I do think it's really important for every candidate running for president, no matter who they are, from President Trump to every candidate, to really be very serious about what we need to do on climate.
Okay, thank you very much. And a first for me here, we're going to take some time to go for a 4th story this week because we wanted to talk very briefly about the Special Olympics, and in the Trump administration's proposed budget, they were going to cut the $17.6 million that is allocated towards funding the Special Olympics. Now that has been turned down by the Senate, and Education Secretary Betsy DeVos had quite a heated exchange with it in a Senate committee there. So should they have targeted Special Olympics recipients for this cut in funding? Rachel, what do you think?
So I am largely, as a rule, very much in favor of cutting government spending, particularly when the private sector has the ability to fill in and fulfill that same role as the government in a way that may be more effective. I do think that's the case with the Special Olympics. However, when thinking about the broader priorities of changing our educational system, I would much rather see Ms. DeVos focusing her efforts on things like revamping the way that we approach standardized testing, funding more charter schools, and considering how we can change the state of our public school system in a way that would be more profitable for students who right now are not doing well in a very, very imbalanced system.
Okay, and Stephanie, where are you on this?
Well, I think it's a very, very small amount of money, and it's crazy to really use that line item to line out Special Olympics, which is a program and a really important thing for families and kids of disabled kids and disabled adults. Also, I mean, the private sector does weigh in terms of contributing to the Special Olympics, so it's a really good example of a public-private partnership where government has some money in the game, and as do private sector contributors and sponsors. So I think we need to always look at what we're doing. I worked on the Hill, and it's a constant battle looking for programs that work and don't work. This is something that works. There's a tremendous amount of support for it, and I really think it borders on mean-spirited to have really taken on Special Olympics.
Okay, and Mimi, why do you think that Betsy DeVos was accusing Democrats of politicizing this issue? Because they weren't the ones proposing the cut.
I can't speak for her. I'm not quite sure, but I do think she did have a quote that I do agree with, and I think kind of speaks to your question. And I'm just going to paraphrase it, but basically, you know, the government isn't responsible for funding every single worthy program. I work for a nonprofit that tutors children every week, and it would be great if the federal government could also fund it. But you know, it's just sometimes things need to be cut, and but that's why we have our system. You know, public-private partnerships are great, but I think it's also, you know, to Rachel's point, a really good opportunity for the private sector to step in.
Okay, thank you very much for your flexibility, adding a little curveball there at the end of the show. But it's time now to take some questions from our viewers, and we start with Susie Hammond, who asks, are Democrats willing to taint other ongoing investigations by releasing the full Mueller report? And that seemed to be something that Mitch McConnell had a problem with. Stephanie, what do you think?
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure.
I think the question goes to maybe this idea that the full Mueller report might include intelligence information and grand jury information and things like that.
Well, I mean, as I said at the very beginning, I certainly think if there's classified information that should not be released in the report, or ever. Classified information is classified for a reason. I mean, if there is information that would have an impact on other investigations or cases, I think that also should be redacted and held back for those purposes. But I don't think only, you know, I think the House and Senate need to be involved in that discussion, as well as the Attorney General. It shouldn't just be the Attorney General making that determination in a very quick way and not giving, you know, more transparency. But sure, if the information is going to be harmful to either our national security or ongoing investigations, I think those things need to be narrowly tailored and redacted.
Okay, and I can't imagine either of you would disagree with that, but is Susie right to be worried about this?
You know, I would be very surprised if an unredacted version of this ever made it to the public. I think that a large part of what motivated this investigation in the first place was a desire for ensuring that there was not a international or national security risk posed by our presidency. And if they care about that enough to go through this process for 2 years, they should then be willing to take the extra time and redact anything that may be harmful.
Okay.
I agree. Yeah, you know, and this is not new. This has been 2 years, and they even waited before announcing it. So I think if anything, you know, that would compromise national security, it would have come out. And
okay, thank you. Well, we'll go to our second question now. Comes from Bernard Flowers, who asks, do you think Smollett will find acting jobs again, given that his reputation is shot, according to Bernard?
no, maybe unless there's somebody who lies, you know, like, because he could play that part. But no, I mean, you know, I think his career, I mean, I'm not a director and I'm not in that sort of field, but how could he have any credibility or even support after this?
Rachel?
You know, I don't know. I think that maybe if he were cast in something, there would be this like strange curiosity from viewers who would be very entranced by the opportunity to get a better look at this man that's caused so many headlines. So, you know, it's hard to tell with that industry. I think it's possible, but not probable.
So you think there's maybe some cachet there, Stephanie, to being involved in all this?
One would hope not, but you know, you might be right, Rachel. I don't know.
It's like the fascination.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, there could be. I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't think we'll be seeing him on Empire again, that's for
Yeah,
sure.
that's for sure, yeah.
But now it's time for our most underreported story of the week. And usually I would say who would like to start. But Mimi, your first time with us, why don't you go ahead?
Yay! Okay, I'm really excited about my story. So yesterday, President Trump awarded a Medal of Honor to an Army sergeant, staff sergeant. His name is Travis Atkins, and it's posthumous. So he actually passed away June 1st, 2007. He actually saw someone who was a suicide bomber, and he shielded his team from them by like attacking, you know, like and keeping him away from the rest of them. So he actually saved everybody's lives, but knew he was sacrificing his life. So his son accepted the Medal of Honor on his behalf, and I thought that was really touching, and I wish there was more news coverage of it, because we need to hear more stories about, you know, our heroes that are putting it out all on the line, and you know, and their families also have to deal with that loss. So
yeah, these stories do seem to become kind of de rigueur, but they're incredible stories of bravery.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Rachel, your most underreported story this week.
Absolutely. So mine is a little less somber. WOW Airlines announced very abruptly that they were ceasing their business. They are no longer operating flights. They did this while many current flights were booked and planned, and thousands of people were trapped at airports. I guess a funding meeting over the last day or so did not go the way that they had hoped, and now they are totally folding as a company, which has left a lot of airlines with maybe some new unexpected passengers, but I have not seen the level of coverage that you would see from another major airline going through a similar immediate change with no warning like this, which is very fascinating.
Yeah, and I was this close to booking tickets home to Scotland with them, so I dodged that one. But Stephanie, take us home, your most underreported story this week.
I actually think an underreported story is that we're starting to see Republican senators, House members, starting to put proposals forward on family and medical leave. And that's been an issue that Republicans have not really worked on as much or been as supportive of. But there are some new proposals. I may or may not agree with them. I don't actually agree with one of the approaches, but I think it's a positive step forward that we have Republicans and Democrats now, I think, united in understanding we need to support parents, adoptive parents, people as they're taking care of their, their failing family members, and give them some kind of federal support by having a better leave system.
Yeah, and Ivanka Trump in the White House has been pushing this, apparently.
She has. So I think this is a really good thing. You know, we need to figure out what the best way to do this is, but I think it's important that people are talking about an issue that's really important to people in their everyday lives, and it's across the political spectrum.
Yeah, so maybe some bipartisanship coming up here on this. What do we think?
I think that there's potential for that. I always like to have hope that there are more issues that we have in common than we have separately. Maybe different approaches, but different approaches, but the same end goal.
Okay, and Mimi, do you think that this is maybe cause for celebration here?
I think so. I would like to echo Rachel's sentiments that, you know, this is something that we can really kind of get together on, and I'm really glad that you brought up that story. So it's definitely encouraging to hear.
Great. Fantastic, everyone. Well, that is all from us for this week. I'm Adam Beer. Thank you for watching The Square Circle. We'll see you next week.